Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you?
Very good, very good. Doing well. I'm going to go into a subject that we've mentioned before, and it's not literally anything like COVID, another COVID story, or an Afghan story, but it has to do with, you know, about the insurrection. Did you know there was an attempted insurrection? No, there was an insurrection.
Yes.
And people have been, in big trouble for that. And they've used the insurrection as an excuse for doing a lot more harm, passing legislation, and believe you, there's been plenty of politicization of it too, because it was unusual, it was different. There was, I think, some traffic tickets should have been passed out for the way these rowdy people acted. But there's some serious things that came out of it too. One that really is a bother is the people still in prison. And here, we're really, really worried about how the civil liberties are going to be treated in Afghanistan. And it's a real problem. And the Afghanis have a problem. But my argument in Washington always was, it's as much as we can say something and take a position, and if you want to go over there and volunteer work, that's one thing. But until we have perfect treatment of all groups and all individuals, the most important group, and civil liberties are protected here, we have no right to be overly concerned. Besides, sometimes when I look at their concerns about civil liberties over there when it comes to the women and the girls and all, that might be a convenient way of stirring up the trouble. But I don't want to talk so much on that because our friend Jonathan Turley has been interviewed. I think he was discussing an article in The Hill, and he was dissecting out this killing of Ashli Babbitt. We have mentioned that, others have, but everybody knows she did it. It took a lot for us to find out who it was, and now that's out and all, but it's all settled. It's all settled. It went to the Justice Department and found out no infractions of the rules of the laws, totally free, and that's it. But for various reasons and theories, he wanted to come clean and get it out on the table, and what his position was, because there'll probably be a civil case, and some argue that he's setting the standards for the civil case coming up. But it seems so strange, though, that he had it with a friendly reporter from CNN. Yeah. And the whole thing is, according to Turley and others, anybody else that had a lick of sense about, the court system, he said that the position that they take, and Jonathan took, is that he crucified himself if there was real law going on, because he, in a way, what I got from Jonathan's argument was that he admitted to doing a lot, and he claimed it was following the book, and sometimes he would express what the book said, and it was completely opposite. It's just so bizarre. So what comes of this, we don't know, but I think this is going to be talked about for a bit longer. But the real tragedy, of course, was the killing, the needless killing. And one of the justifications they used to say that maybe the police did have that much authority because it was an insurrection. And nobody proved anything about an insurrection. They said, well, did she have a gun? Oh, no, she didn't have a gun. And nobody had a gun, and the only person killed was by this policeman, and that Jonathan, talks a little bit about, and we might mention some things, because he hasn't done himself much good by being out there, because if this was a real effort to come across justice, it turns out that he's not one of the good guys.
Yeah. Well, Turley is no apologist for the people that were in the Capitol on January 6th. In fact, he's very, very harsh. He was very critical from the very beginning. He did not like it at all. But one of the things we like about Turley is that he's very objective. He's not partisan. He's not steeped in this stuff. So what he did is he took a look at the justification that the officer himself gave, Officer Byrd, he gave it in the interview. One of the things that stood out was when he said, "That's my job," and that's amazing, to shoot an unarmed woman who is posing literally no threat to you. That's my job. I mean, that doesn't sound very good. But the interview you're talking about, where he was very, very self-serving, patting himself on the back, saying that he saved countless lives by shooting an unarmed Air Force veteran, it doesn't make any sense if you're in the rational world, if you're in the thinking world, because there were no lives being threatened. Yes, there was some unacceptable violence by some of the protesters, and they should face justice for that. But the important point that Turley makes is, by the standards set down by the Department of Justice in reviewing the shooting and the Capitol Hill Police by saying no further action will be taken, essentially what they're saying is, under the standard established by that review of the shooting, and this is Turley saying this, under the standard, hundreds of rioters could have been gone down on January 6th. Hundreds and hundreds could have been gone down, in addition to the people all last summer who were out rioting, burning down Apple stores. The police could have just picked them all off.
And not to even mention or suggest the difference between what happens on the streets when the races are reversed,
yes,
or something.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no sense of justice, and here it is that he's doing. But I think this whole thing is they tried to justify, and I guess for the courts, which was totally biased. That's why, when it comes to the FBI and the CIA and the Justice Department, I'm sure there's some good people there, and I guess if you ever have to defend yourself there, you sure hope you meet a couple. But that is so sad on what happens, and then we send people around the world lose lives, kill a lot of people. A lot of our soldiers get killed because these other countries aren't living within the law, and just think of this, and to get this on the books. Hopefully this is so bizarre and so outrageous that it will never become a precedent for it. But if they use these terms, I guess they can get away with it. But they're not true. They're not true. And the rules, really, when you look at it, are pretty good at restricting the police in their use of violence. And this is hardly the case when some of the killings by the police in the inner city, it could have been done a different way, and somebody does get killed, but it's a little bit different than killing this woman, and he never didn't even know if she had a gun or not.
Yeah.
And there was she committed no violence. She committed, and Jonathan has that point. She committed infraction, but really it was a basis of I imagine 99% of them were demonstrators, because this is one place where the FBI was sort of, wow, they came out and they said there was no conspiracy.
Yeah.
But it just was coincidental, I guess, that Babbitt was a Trump supporter.
Yeah. Well, this Officer Michael Byrd looks like, at best, incompetent, bumbling. He was written up because he left his loaded pistol in the bathroom once. And as Turley reports, he thought that his rank as lieutenant and role as commander of the House Chambers would protect him, that he expected, quote, be treated differently when he made infractions like this. A lot of people that know more about guns than I do say that his trigger discipline was very, very bad in some of those pictures that we saw him inside the chambers. But you're right, the whole thing falls apart when the FBI says there was no insurrection, there was no organized political movement to take over and overthrow the government. That undermines everything that he says. But the real point, Dr. Paul, the real thing that we've seen is that when you demonize people to the point where they're considered subhuman, and that's what's been done with people like her and Trump supporters, when you demonize them to the point where it's subhuman, then it's almost no problem to kill them. It's almost justified to kill them. And we've seen this throughout history. Sadly, we saw it in Nazi Germany. When you demonize a group of people, Trump supporters, what have you, then there's no repercussions to killing them. And I think that's what we're seeing.
It pleases us when we get a ruling from the FBI that says there's no conspiracy and there's somebody, it looks like they're speaking the truth. But then when you compare what they did with the policeman by exonerating him, and there was no guilt, he didn't break any rules, no laws, nothing. And then you say, well, are the people who were arrested, for going in, and some people theorize that they were actually encouraged to go in by some of the policemen that were supposed to be protecting the building, and there's a bunch of them still in prison,
held without bail.
That has to be a vicious crime.
Yeah.
That's what they should be dealing with. And yet, boy, they got rid of this case fast. Boom, he's okay. But, sometimes justice wins out in the end, and there will be a civil case, which is always so messy. Can you imagine needing to go to a civil court after you lose a loved one?
Yeah.
But in this case, it's actually a step in the direction of trying to get a little bit of fairness put in here, a little bit of justice deserving. I don't think he's been removed. He hasn't been guilty of anything. When the case comes up, which is going to take a long time, it's going to take years probably before they close that case.
But you make a great point, and that is this is political justice. All of these people who've been rotting away in these horrible jails for very, very minor charges, conspiracy and trespassing, while you have a guy who shot an unarmed woman who's let off because he's favored by the political class, and these unwashed Trump supporters are not favored by the political class. We've seen that before. It's called the Soviet Union, and that's the way we're heading. Speaking of that, our next story that we want to cover is very interesting. And actually, let's put up that next. This is just a little graphic to show what we're going to talk about. But it's very fascinating. Homeschooled children increased from 13,000 in 1973 to 5 million in 2020. That's incredible. What growth.
Sometimes or frequently we use the term unintended consequences. Don't do that. There will be unintended consequences. You're going out there to save the world. You're going to print some money and help everybody else, and the economy is going to thrive. The unintended consequences, or sometimes it's intended consequences too. But in this case, the unintended consequences, no way would they say that, matter of fact, I think it surprised a lot of people how quickly this has happened. But the interesting thing is, the dates I think you cited just now, the long-term and short-term, and there was a real boost in this last year, but it's been trending that way. For a couple decades, there's been more and more. But I think what's happening now is there's an acceleration from the COVID lockdown and the incentives, but they're just continuing and accelerating. They got away with that kind of nonsense, and that just encourages them to do more now. But now the people are starting to speak out, and thank goodness there's still an option, because in the early 80s, I recall, at that time there was a lot of state legislation that was really, really bearing down on homeschoolers. And there were some court cases that were ruled favorably, and homeschooling then grew in numbers, and it still is, and it's growing tremendously. Even our homeschooling program, our Ron Paul curriculum, has grown significantly in this past year or so, and people are looking, and it isn't like we had a megaphone. We try to spread our message, but it wasn't like that. It was just people are looking around, and I think many people come to our program because of just dealing with this program as well as word of mouth. And that's a good way to do it, because you homeschool your kids, and that is so. That's why we should be very, very alert to watching for the next crackdown on there. We look how they crack down on medical care when they don't like it. Look how they crack down on monetary things when they don't like it. And that's why, and there are some places that they're being harassed already, and they have been, but they'll decide homeschooling is an asset to the insurrection. And that's the reason we have to close them down.
Well, it's interesting here in Texas, and this is from the article, one of the articles we read this morning, from August 2020 to August of 2021, there has been a 500% increase in homeschooling in Texas, here in Texas. 5-fold increase in homeschoolers, according to the Texas Homeschool Association. And it's a little ironic that we're talking about this today because as we speak, my wife and 2 daughters are in the homeschool co-op. We formed a co-op, a local community co-op, where parents share some of the burden of teaching different things that they're expertise in. And so I think that parents are realizing that, the old image of homeschooling where you have your kids around and it's so much of a pressure on the parent. It's not the case anymore. There's so many options. We use a hybrid option. We have a co-op that we go and the kids enjoy some of the social aspects. They learn a lot. They also take the Ron Paul curriculum for certain classes and they learn a lot from that. We couldn't get chemistry, so we got a couple of families together and found a chemistry teacher and that person to teach that. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. And one of the best things about it is you starve the state because they're not sitting in those seats.
It's not an all or nothing thing like some people think that you're either in the government schools or the mother is teaching every single subject and she's sitting beside their child all day long. That's just not true.
It can be if you want it, but it doesn't have to be.
I want to state these statistics that's been around for a while, but they're really, really fascinating. That 41% are non-white.
Huh, yeah, I noticed that.
41% non-white, they're black, Asian, and Hispanics.
And there's the biggest jump is in those groups for homeschooling.
And one of the strongest motivation, even before COVID, has been the critical race theory.
Yeah.
People, that hits home, it hits at the family, and this thing has excited people to the point where they're looking for options. And there's legislation being proposed in California, and the people promoting it sort of identifies what's going on, and it's a bill called 101, and it's putting pressure on and forcing this race theory, and there's resistance to it, but people recognize this as being literally the people behind it fit into the category of those individuals who support cultural Marxism. And that's why we've seen it in the colleges for a good many years. Now we're seeing it in the Congress, we're seeing a reflection of it, and everybody say, well, it's over, they won, we lost. I say, no. People are just starting to see it, and people are waking up, and the opposition to this is going to grow and grow, and the homeschool system is going to help do that.
Yes, and even in California, the homeschool applications, according to this article, have doubled during the 2020-2021 school year, doubled in California. And you ask the question, well, maybe what's that? Well, of course, all of the restrictions on kids, but as you pointed out, and let's put up that next clip because this is what you were talking about, Dr. Paul. We saw this today in the Federalist publication. Meet the Marxist revolutionaries behind California's emerging ethnic studies for public schools. They want to pass this bill to force students to take ethnic studies. And as usual, you see the groups behind it. In fact, let's look at that next one. This is from that article from the Federalists. Let's look at that next group. This is the organization that is designing the curriculum. Their goals are explicit and extreme, and they quote from them. This is the Union del Barrio. Quote, revolutionary nationalism demands a complete transformation of the social, economic, and political institutions that presently form the basis of our oppression. So what they want to do is they want to have an abolition of borders, government by race-based socialist collective, destruction of Western liberalism. Union del Barrio is one of these groups that are involved in doing this. No wonder parents, and I'm sure a lot of Hispanic parents, they don't want to have anything to do with this garbage.
Right. I'm going to move on to another subject, not a new subject, but different than the homeschooling, and that has to do with the vaccinations. And this is an article that came from Lou Rockwell's side. And the title is 60% of those older than 50 who die from COVID have been double vaxxed.
Huh. Well, interesting.
You mean it doesn't work? You know, this whole thing, when I read the stories about somebody comes down with this and they rush off and they might be well into the disease and they want their vaccination, and then they'll start talking about ivermectin and hydroxy. And I think one of the big things about that is a lot of that stuff that would hit these articles and the doctors who say we could have kept 85% out of the hospital. It was early diagnosis, early treatment, making it readily available and not being impeded by government rules and regulations. Instead, the government takes over and has caused a great deal of trouble. And that, I think, is where it is. So if they can get the medication earlier, it's going to even be better. But it's just disgusting and heartbreaking to know that that this one statistic that we have already quoted is 85% of the people, would not probably had to be admitted to the hospital. Then the hospitals get jammed up, and then they all have. I don't even think the experts can identify exactly what virus they're treating. The virus changed by nature, and yet what if they tried to have a virus? I think of it. If the cold was a little bit worse, or the virus it changed, what if they kept racing at it and racing at it? You'd have what we have here, and if you don't support it, you don't care about people, you want to kill people, and you're certainly not a patriotic American.
And that 85% you quoted, that's from Fauci. 85% of people treated with the antibodies could get out of avoid going to the hospital. So that's not us making it up. Well, I had also slightly similar. These are my last couple of things. Let's put up that next clip. This is from Zero Hedge, but this is kind of an interesting twist on it, though. You can get a little bit bigger on that one. And I doubt this will happen, but CDC advisory panel hints that it won't back Biden's booster jab plan. It's not about the booster jab, in my opinion. What I found fascinating about this article was, first of all, it opens with a discussion of shares, stock shares of BioNTech, Moderna, and Pfizer will be closely watched on Tuesday after the CDC's advisory panel, et cetera, et cetera. Let's look at the next clip. This is from the same article, and I've highlighted it as well. Graybush believes the meeting indicates that, quote, an uptick in third doses may not come as rapidly as investors have been expecting. Investors, it's fascinating to see this in terms of massive, massive profits being generated from these companies, and look as rather than an issue of public health. And that brings me to my final thing, which is that humor, we know, is often very effective. Sarcasm is very effective. Hyperbole is effective. The Babylon Bee, I think, is one of the masters at this. Look at this last quote, Dr. Paul. In jest, but hilariously possible. That's a little big. Now I can't read it. Costco introduces new 5-gallon family-size Pfizer vaccine. So anyone that goes to Costco knows what it's like. But that's a funny kind of, but very effective humor.
You know, they probably don't even care if it's wasted because the government probably has already paid for it. So, but you know, this idea of the president and the CDC debating among themselves, and the CDC saying they're disagreeing maybe with what the president wants to do. And I got to thinking, isn't this the weirdest thing in the world? We want a debate. We want a debate between the scientists and the doctors who treat patients and the ones who don't. That's been one of the biggest beef, is that the people on TV and the people who are arguing they have control of the CDC, they've never taken care of a patient. So we have this argument between the president and the CDC. The president shouldn't be practicing medicine. The CDC shouldn't be practicing medicine. They should be practicing trying to understand and study what individual liberty is, and what voluntarism is all about, and personal choices, and what doctor-patient relations should be like, and getting out this public health thing that is nothing more than a political scandal and a money-making machine.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to close by saying this will be my last day doing the show for a few days. We're leaving this afternoon for Washington, D.C. for the Ron Paul Institute Conference. We're excited to see so many of you at the conference. Again, this is a record. I think we sold out 3 times because we got a bigger venue and had more tickets and had more. So now we're completely sold out for the 3rd time in this conference. It'll be the biggest Ron Paul Institute conference ever. It's going to be a blast, and I'm looking forward to it.
Good. Am I invited to this conference?
I heard that you're going to be there.
Okay. I better get my ticket. Right? And you're going to drive. You're brave. You're going to get there, though.
I hope so.
No. And I want to thank our viewers once again for all the support that you give us, and we are excited about seeing people there too. And it was so disappointing this past year and a half because we had to do some readjusting. I'd have been throwing my arms up about how to reschedule this, but Daniel's handled it. He adjusts very easily. But I won't tell you exactly what he says when he's not on the camera, you know. So, but no, it will be fun, and we look forward to it. And I think the big thing is it's confirming my belief, and my suggestion is that people should get together who are like-minded. That is certainly important in the midst of a financial and social crisis, because you have to know where your friends are and your family is and all these things, because there will be a need for people to give support to each other. So this is a time to meet people, and if you come for that reason, in serious discussion and a lot of material, but you have to have fun if you come to one of our meetings, because I think it's too serious if you take every single word. I had to work at it during this so-called pandemic to try to convince myself, well, you know, it's not quite so bad. And when I finally was convinced that it will all end, and it will end when an idea whose time will have come, and it will be changed, and we have the evidence that is approaching. More and more people every day. Daniel has put up some pictures, I believe yesterday, of showing people around the world, not 100 or 200 or 300, but many thousands of people, because it's become acceptable to change direction, and that to me is a sign that we should be satisfied with the direction we're going. And once again, thank you for your support. Well, thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.